Good evening, everybody. We're glad you're here. Still got some folks coming in. Welcome. We thank you for joining us, being a part of our worship time together. Several things I'll share with you after we finish tonight, and we'll talk about some more folks before that. But I know everybody's got questions, and I sure want to try to share the information that we have in regard to baby Kit. But I'll wait and do that when we get finished and after we go off the air tonight. But we welcome you folks from home. Thank you for joining us as well. Several folks on our list here. Eliza, we want to continue to pray for her. Also, Miss Betty is scheduled for her for her test this week. Pray that things will be well. Joey, I'm going to back up just a little bit, okay? Pray that things will be well with her. She is going to have one of the valves replaced. They're hoping not two. So that's our specific prayer in regard to that. Pray that things will just stay where they are and she will not have to have two valve replacements. Continue to pray for baby Carter. Pray that things will continue to improve for him. Talked to Audrey yesterday. She said he was a little some better. So we're praying continued blessings on him in regard to that. Anthony Richardson, continue to pray for him. Still some things pending there, but we want to be mindful of Anthony and Montez. Alan Bates had hernia surgery on Monday, so let's be mindful of him as he's recovering. Trip Underwood had knee surgery. Janice, things going well for him? Well, if you hadn't heard, it must have been okay. If things hadn't gone well, you'd have heard something probably. Yeah, okay. Well, hopefully things are going well. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Continue to pray for Emily Glover as she is recovering from a hospital stay over the weekend. I reckon everything's going as well as it can. And also Eric Angel. I haven't heard any more about him, but he did have 5 bypasses on Sunday. I also want to remember Marie Hart. That is Teresa Thigpen's sister. Also Philip May's brother-in-law, Chet Young. Continue to remember him. He is on 24/7 dialysis right now. So that's pretty significant, and we want to be mindful of him. Also, Alvin Turpin. Alvin has been, trying to get over his back surgery, really been hurting a lot of things in the work zone and all of that. Really couldn't get any relief, trying to treat his back, trying to see what they could do to help him get better. And they learned today that his back is probably okay. What he's troubled with right now is kidney stones. And they didn't know it was kidney stones. They thought it was back. So he is hopefully going to be able to pass those and not have to have further surgery. But they did request our prayers, and we sure want to pray. We do want to pray for baby Kit. And as I said, I'll give you some more information about that just in a little bit. Also, Carol Wales passed away today, and express our sympathy to Tim's family and Miss Debbie's sister-in-law, her brother's wife. And so I learned from her today that Miss Carol had passed away. So I don't have any more information than that, but I do want to share that with you and let that be known that she did pass away today. Anybody else we need to add to our sick list, maybe that we overlooked or that I just didn't call their name? All right. Well, Mike Curtis, lead us in a prayer, sir. Amen. Thank you, Mike. All right, let's go back to Luke chapter 15. We will have a little bit more next week on the father in this story. We're going to wrap up these boys tonight and try to come to a little bit better understanding about all of this. Again, remember, Jesus is teaching this lesson in response to and kind of in a counter field toward the Pharisees, and hopefully you know a good bit about them already and recognize their philosophy and their attitude. Again, I will say about the Pharisees that in precept, what they were trying to do would sound like a good idea, and that was try to preserve what they knew and what they'd been taught. Where things got out of hand is when they started making rules that superseded the rules that they were trying to keep. And those rules actually became more important than the rules that God had described. And you understand the old law and its importance to them. And as I said, when they first began, and the process of the Pharisees as they first began, it was an effort to try to keep people close to God and to keep them from veering off the path. Well, with the advent of Jesus, the path was a different path. It was a continuation of the old law, but it was also the establishment of a new law that was going to supersede the things that they were used to and the things they were trying to protect, to the point where then they wound up with what they called then the oral Torah, or the oral traditions, and those things became more important than the law. So that's kind of how this all started. There were people who were coming to hear Jesus taught that the Pharisees couldn't understand. They couldn't understand, first of all, why Jesus would have anything to do with them. They couldn't understand why these people would be interested in what he had to say. In fact, the tax collectors and notorious sinners were people that were coming to hear Jesus. And I'd submit to you, who better than the sinners and than the tax collectors and notorious sinners, as they came to hear what Jesus had to say. Realize and remember now, Jesus is new on the scene. And even now, over 2,000 years later, the message of Jesus is still a message that sometimes people don't get and don't understand and can't figure out. We talked a little bit about that in our Sunday afternoon conversations. But this lost boy, this wasteful son, the one who had rebelled, and the one who had wasted his father's substance in riotous living, as he was accused later, that boy came to himself, and he realized where he was. He realized where home was. He realized what he had done. He recognized and understood that there were things that he needed to correct to get back to where he was. He knew what he was going to say. He went back to his father and made his confession, made his statement in regard to all of that, and was willing to become a servant in his father's household. Well, all of that went fine. Where things got sideways was when the older brother heard all about it. Now, I've had people tell me that they were the elder brother. And in their life, they feel like, in some ways, they feel like the older or the elder brother, outside the fact that they might be the oldest in their family. I'm gonna share a few things with you tonight that I want to see if we can land here in the conversation, because some of the feelings, in fact, most of the feelings that the older brother was having, the elder brother was having, were legitimate feelings. The things that he was doing and the way that he was responding would be the way most people that would respond. But there were two critical errors that he made in his trying to understand why all this is happening and how you could celebrate this boy who's done all of this, and all the things that I'm going to share with you just in a few minutes. But there were two things that would make the difference in his story, where had he not crossed those lines, his part of the story might not have been here. Had he not crossed those two lines. And let me see if I can kind of help us get there, because a lot of times we have talked about this older brother as if to say we would never have those feelings if we were in that situation. And we would not feel like he felt if it was us that was him in that story. And I'm not so sure that that's altogether true, because as human beings, there are going to be things that you or I are going to experience. How we handle those things, though, especially from a spiritual perspective, it's going to be where the difference is going to be made. And let's talk about that a little bit. There are a lot of cultural issues involved in this story. The young man, as I said, he came to his he came to his senses. He went home, verse 22. His father said to the servants, "Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we've been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and has now returned. He was lost, but now he is found." So the party began. That's where the trouble started for the older brother as far as our story is concerned. The trouble really started before that young man came back home. But let's set the stage for the lesson just in kind of real terms. In that day and time and in that age, people didn't leave home. I mean, unless they were going to be rebellious. There was an indication of the patriarch, and the patriarch, Donnie Bredlick, said this morning that he called it, they lived in a compound. And I use the word territory, but however you want to think about it, in the land that a man might have that would be his property, then there was the kind of the leader in the household, and he was called the patriarch. Now, we can know the patriarchs from the Old Testament, but in every family there were patriarchs. There was the leading man. And they would live in the center of the property or center of the compound. And then the children would surround his property with theirs. And if there was, one or two, or if there were more than that, then that property would be divided. And often it was divided by age. And then the oldest son would have his place because he's next in line. And then everybody else would formulate their path from there. Their children would then live around them. And so on as far as the property could extend. That was the way they lived. Well, when this young man left home, that was counter to everything the elder brother knew. Because people did not leave home at that time. There's also this patriarchal respect. And the respect that he was trying to protect for his father. And the things that he was required as the oldest son to protect are a part of this story, even though he got a double portion. He was still trying to protect the honor and the respect that was due the patriarch in this family. That's a part of the story. And not only those two things, but he also had the moral duty. And the moral duty, what I mean by that is just the desire or the responsibility of seeing to it that things were done properly. The moral obligation or the moral duty that was a part of this conversation. All of that is in play as you or I might think about this older brother. Verse 25, the older son was in the fields working. All this other is happening. Older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. "Your brother is back," he was told, "and your father has killed the fattened calf. We are celebrating because of his safe return." The older brother was angry and would not go in. The older brother was angry and would not go in. Now, I don't have time for an illustration here that all of us could buy into as far as ourselves are concerned. I don't know what picture I would have to paint to help you find yourself in this situation. Hopefully you'd never find yourself in this situation, but if you could imagine yourself having the feelings that this young man had, then you can find some teeth in the story as Jesus is talking about it and as Jesus is thinking out loud with those that he's talking to. This older brother, the Bible says that he was angry. Anger is part of a line of feelings that don't begin at anger. Anger is usually preceded by some other things. Anger is usually preceded by some other things. The idea of anger would surely follow resentment. Surely follow resentment. And there might be some jealousy that would be involved in this line of thinking. There might also be the idea of betrayal, and him thinking, well, I've done all these things, and now none of that is paying off for me. In fact, after we finished class this morning, Bonnie Flippo said two things that are part of the story as far as she was concerned, and one of them was jealousy, and the other was betrayal. I said, Miss Bonnie, you're exactly right. Those two things are a part of this conversation and have to be considered as you think about this older brother who was there working in the fields. Not only was resentment a part of it, not only was jealousy a part of it, not only was the feeling of betrayal part of it, but the idea of bitterness. And bitterness usually doesn't start at, it doesn't find you at the bottom part of this. It usually finds its way on your climb to the idea of anger and disappointment. And you know, the odd thing about those words, resentment, anger, bitterness, disappointment, jealousy, betrayal, those things are a part of what I would deem a vicious cycle. You wouldn't go from one to the other and to another and to another and to another, and then at some point just get over it. No, you're going to wheel back through it, and you're going to experience those all again, especially when something else happens that knocks the scab off of your heart, and the feelings that you had before now are rushing out again as all the blood is rushing to your head. What reasons did the older brother have to be angry? Well, he was working in the field. He had protected the family's honor. He had held on to the standards. And again, you got to remember the Pharisees. That's who this lesson is directed to as Jesus is talking. He's talking exactly about their mindset and the way that they conducted themselves. That was a part of it as well. This young man had to work, but it sounded as though he was working alone. Now, there were other servants that were present, but those servants would not have the same status that he would have. And so as he was working, I'm sure he was working alone because, you know, he was treading out the corn because his younger brother has gone away. A dangerous mindset that had he avoided, the story might not have wound up like it wound up if he could have avoided the mindset of pride. If he could have avoided the mindset of pride. He'd been there, he'd worked hard, he'd carried on the family business. Someone said by the name, the person's name is Fabian Harford. And Fabian Harford, in an article that was written, made this one statement that stuck out as I was observing the things that had been written. This is one of the statements that I thought was important, especially when you think about pride. And the statement is, pride is the sin that will keep you from crying out for a Savior. Pride is the sin that will keep you from crying out for a Savior. So if you want to circle pride in the story, that was one of the steps that the elder brother took that was going to send him in the wrong direction. You know, the other young man found out that the road to trouble was short and the way back home was long. Well, that same road is playing out here with the older brother, and that first step that he made in this whole situation was pride. The second part of this is a matter of entitlement. You know, the dangers of entitlement. I deserve this. I deserve a party just like he got. And you've never done anything for me, he complained. I deserve the recognition that ought to be shared in what I've been doing. And you're celebrating this guy who wasted everything you gave him. It's as though no one seemed to care. No one seemed to care that he had been faithful. And he was dejected because of it. If you'll put yourself in his spot, just for a second, I don't want you to stay there long. But if you put yourself in his spot, how many people do you know, or how many of us would not have some of those same feelings if we weren't careful? How many of us would not have those same feelings if we're not careful? Because all of those, maybe except for pride, all of those are things that are going to be natural reactions to the things that were happening in the story. The feelings made sense. The feelings made sense. His brother got his inheritance and left. He came home and everybody acted like he hadn't done anything wrong. The feelings he had were real, and they were real easy to have. Why celebrate a failure? Why celebrate with somebody, especially like you're celebrating with them? Why celebrate that person? Next week we're going to talk about forgiveness and how all that works. And I think the example of the father in the story is a perfect example of how forgiveness ought to work. But why, from his perspective, from the older brother's perspective, why celebrate a failure? And if you're going to celebrate him, why celebrate him like this? Why celebrate him in such a big way? The main problem in this story, the main problems in this story were pride and entitlement. Pride and entitlement. His feeling of superiority because he didn't waste his father's money. He didn't go away. He did do the work that needed to be done. All the while hating his brother. He deserved the party, not the sinner. I'll give you a test here. Some of these companies that you or I might have been with, if you pay attention to the commercials, you ever hear what they say about new customers? I listen. I don't listen to hear it, but I hear it when it's said, new customers get. And what do the old customers say? Well, I've been here for 411 years and you ain't never gave me a new phone. In fact, what I paid in that 411 years, you could give a bunch of them away, right? New customers get so much percentage off. Well, why can't I get that percentage off? I've been a customer the whole time. Now, if you've never felt that way, will you just raise your hand? Yeah, that's right. So this is not a new concept. This is not a new deal. We just need to try to understand what's going on here. I deserve part of this. This superiority to anyone and everyone else. And both of those things were hand in glove with the Pharisees. Folks, here's the reality of it. As far as his father was concerned, the boy that went away was dead. Didn't think he'd ever see him again. The boy that went away was dead. If he wasn't dead, he was lost. And when you look at both of those two things in this process, how could you not be thrilled that that boy is back home? How could you not be thrilled that this boy is back home? The father, when he heard that the older brother wouldn't come in, he went out to him and he said, look, dear son, you have always stayed by me, and everything I have is yours. You see, everything that was left was his. He had fulfilled his responsibility. What he resented as what he thought may be fun was actually a nightmare. He ruined his reputation by hating. Joel Caudill pointed out this morning, and I thought it was a perfect statement in regard to this. He said, you know, this older brother was going to be next. He was next in command. He was next in command. And how do you think what he did in this instant, how do you think that affected his influence with other people, especially those servants that were going to be working for him one day? Brother Selton mentioned this morning another thought that I thought was good. You know, the idea of this young man coming home and this resentment toward this party. He said, you know, what better way to treat somebody who has been away than like this than to kick them to the curb and watch them wash down the drain? And I thought that was so true. And you know, the rest of the story here with this older brother, he was going to be rewarded. He was going to be rewarded, but his attitude wrecked the whole thing. His attitude wrecked the whole thing. This is what I've kind of called the trap of conceitful resentment. Conceitful resentment. What that guy thought he deserved, while hating the one who got what he wanted. Conceitful resentment. You know, I tell you, these same feelings, if somebody's not careful, these same feelings can be had today. These same feelings can be had today. If a person's not careful, they can have those same feelings. How in the world could they ever forgive that person? Why? Well, they have never even told me thank you. Well, Jesus was teaching two groups of people here. He was teaching those that needed to hear that they were forgiven, and he was trying to teach some others who needed to know how to forgive. And I think it's a beautiful lesson, and I want to talk about that some more next week. You know, the idea of being able to help folks who needed help. The idea of seeking for the lost. And to fight the urge of self-righteousness. And that was really the MO of the Pharisees. They were better than everybody else because they kept the rules better. And they did the right things righter. And they were gooder than anybody else. So Jesus taught a great lesson. If the older brother, if he could have just realized the heart of the Father, what a great lesson he could have learned. And you know, the awful thing about this particular study in that particular day in this particular chapter is the Pharisees either didn't get it or didn't pay attention. Because if you keep reading in chapter 16, it's not going to be too many verses till something else is going to happen. Now, one thing for sure we need to understand is that every time Jesus is talking to Pharisees, he's not talking to the same ones. We don't know which ones he was talking to, but, you know, there weren't just 10 or 15 of them that kind of walked around in a group, a pretty sizable group of people. And these were guys that were kind of policing everybody everywhere. As I said before, not every Pharisee was bad, but there were some sure bad Pharisees. Jesus tried to help them and tried to teach them. Something to think about and something to consider. Because, yeah, you might have some anger and you might be bitter and you might be resentful in some ways. You might be jealous. You might be betrayed, but don't let those things cut your heart out. Those things can be repented of. Pride and self-righteousness are two of the hardest things to get over. Two of the hardest things to get over. Well, thanks for listening. If there's a spiritual need, please give us a chance to assist you folks at home, 256-740-2482. All right, let's talk about some things here on our midweek reminder, and then after we go off the air, I'll share just a little bit more information with you and try not to take a long time. Lights to Leaders, all that's coming up here March the 1st. We'll be noting that. Also, the Keepers have got their thing planned for March the 7th, so notice that as you have young ladies that might be involved in that. Folks who are on the list for the banquet on Friday night, it starts at 6, so please note that. Also Sunday, if you are inclined to do so, and I hope that you will be, let's wear gray in honor of Grayson DeVito. And also they're planning a bake sale that Chrissy sent to me today and asked that I share it. I think others have as well. You might notice my Facebook page if you'd like to help. And I think the Healing Place is going to be the recipient of what they raise in regard to that. Don't forget the shower this coming Sunday for Molly and for Mason. And I appreciate the work that's going into that. If you've got questions about that, see Miss Janice. And let's do our best to encourage Molly and Mason with a new baby. Even Better Wednesdays, February 18th, Ladies Night Out. Don't forget that, February 19th. And that's coming up. If you don't want to ride the bus, you can meet them down there, but I think the tickets are grouped together. You can see Joyce about that. She'll fix you up about all of that. CYC, I reckon we got everything set on all of that, and we'll have some more firm details for Sunday as far as leaving time, and appreciate the work that's going into that. So we'll look forward to that on Sunday. It's looking like somewhere between 7 and 8 o'clock as far as our departure time. So that'll be firm between now and then, and Sawyer and Autumn are working on that. Don't forget the bridal shower for Emma Baggett. That is AJ Flippo's fiance, so let's be mindful of that, February the 28th. If you would like to participate in the backpack program, right now what we need is Pop-Tarts. Someone gave a pretty good donation the other day, and they were able to buy a lot of the juice drinks, but we need Pop-Tarts. If you'd like to contribute some, a small box or a big one, then that's fine. But if you'd like to participate, that's what our biggest need is right now. Anything? 5th through 12th grade. It's not on here. 5th through 12th grade, Devo Sunday night after snack. Okay, so that'll be coming up. A lot happening, but we can handle it all, and I'm certain about all of that. So that'll be Sunday night this week. Pasta and what? Soup and pasta. Is that furnished? Soup. Okay, that's furnished. Okay, so all they got to do is just come and eat and have a good time. Okay, great. That's good. Anything else? All right, let's have our prayer, and then after that, let me give you just a little bit more information that we have here in regard to Baby Kit, and then we'll be dismissed. Okay, Harris, you mind leading us as we're dismissed, please?
Thank you for every day giving us the opportunity to worship and learn more about you. And Father, I ask you to be with all the ones that we've mentioned that need you, whether they're in the hospital with sicknesses or whether, Father, they just had some bad things going on in their life. We always ask that and hope that they look to you for guidance and for help that you give them. Father, thank you for everything you do for us. In your Son's name we pray.
Amen. Joey, give me the signal here that we're clear, and I'll catch you up right quick on what we know about Baby Kit.